is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and Danielle Allentuck coming to you live on a Thursday afternoon, wherever you are watching us, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Please give us a like, a thumbs up, write us a good review. I will read it out here on the show if you write us a good review. We are going to talk today about the devastating news that John Means is headed to the injured list to lengthen what has been a lengthy list already of injuries in the course of his career. We're also going to talk about how the Orioles' sweepless streak has come to a close, and we'll also talk about the trade that the Orioles made late last night. But first, Danielle, you're coming off a series from hell in St. Louis. You are the human rain delay. You're bringing rain delays everywhere that you go. And you were also greeted after the Orioles were swept yesterday by the Cardinals mascot holding a pie. Is this correct?
Yeah, it's a mad dash after games where you have to sprint to get downstairs to talk to the manager and the players. And I have a flight to make, so I'm already panicked. And we're rounding a corner, and the Cardinals mascot comes out of the stands. He's holding a pie for who knows what reason. And he just makes eye contact with me and starts sprinting after me. So I'm just running through the basement of the Cardinals stadium, and we round a corner to where the visiting locker room is, and Hyde is just standing outside it with his arms crossed, staring at us. So
that's ideal.
A very odd way to end a very odd series.
Yeah, I'm glad that you didn't get pied. I mean, you could not have found Hyde in a worse mood after all of the rain delays and the streak ending. That was just the wrong time to be greeted by a man in a Cardinal mascot holding a pie.
Honestly, I was thinking, how am I supposed to get on a flight if I'm covered in pie?
Yeah, how are you supposed to do really anything? That would be
walk into the clubhouse like this. There was just no good way. I think that mascot may have caught me if we didn't run into the visitors clubhouse right there. So this is what I trained for. So
yeah, if he had pied you, I think the Oriole bird might have had to stand up for you at some point.
We're not super close, so I don't know.
You and the Oriole bird, really? Yeah. Is there some beef there?
We've had some beef. Not as much as Dinger in Colorado, though. I think mascots not my friends.
There's something about you. I don't know what it is. We'll do a banner video
I don't know.
about Danielle's long history with mascots. All right, well, let's talk about what we were supposed to talk about today on the Banner Baseball Show, and that is the news that John Means is headed to the injured list with a left forearm strain, and this is an absolute bummer for a guy that has been beset by injuries over the course of his career, really since his breakout 2019 All-Star season. And Danielle, this is just another in a long line of injuries. Just to go back to where this all began, 2019, he breaks out, has his rookie season, makes the All-Star team, makes 27 starts that year, pitches 155 innings. That would prove to be the most in his career so far. 2022, things are going great. He's only beginning his age 27 season, is named the Orioles opening day starter, and then has arm fatigue and is forced to miss that start, goes on the injured list 13 days later, makes his 2020 debut a month later, misses a start with COVID, but still finishes the shortened season with 43 innings pitched. 2021, named the opening day starter once again, dominates the Red Sox on opening day, throws a no-hitter in May, pulled in the first inning of a start at the beginning of May with shoulder fatigue. He's placed on the injured list with a strained shoulder, comes back after the All-Star break, still finishes with 146 innings and a 3.62 ERA. 2022, opening day starter once again, makes his first start against the Rays, but just one start later is taken out early with a forearm strain that turns into Tommy John surgery in late April. So he misses the rest of the 2022 season. He's rehabbing from Tommy John in 2023. Then he suffers an upper back strain in May 2023. Finally comes back in September, has 4 very good starts as the Orioles are making their playoff push. But he's left off the ALDS roster with elbow soreness, an absolute bummer of a news update that Brandon Hyde delivered just as the Orioles' first playoff series in years was beginning. So he misses the ALDS. And then to start 2024, Mike Elias begins spring training by telling the media that John Means is a month behind schedule and that he's going to start the season later than all of the rest of the pitchers. finally makes his 2024 debut on May 4th. And now, after 4 starts, he's headed back on the injured list with this left forearm strain. Danielle, we saw him come out of that game yesterday in St. Louis, and only 3 innings. Of course, the rain could have been an excuse for his early exit, but this was much more than the rain.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been done after 3 innings yesterday, regardless of if there was a delay. He was actually already back in the clubhouse when the delay started. So they had Albert Suarez warming to take over for him. But there were a couple signs yesterday that something was off. I mean, he still pitched 3 shutout innings, but he was shaking his arm out a lot. His velo was down. So he didn't look quite like himself. My question for when the media talks to him soon is this something that came up, yesterday? Was it the first time they're aware of it? Or is it something that had been bothering them that we're not completely sure about yet? But he's getting testing done right now. Pretty much any pitcher, when they have any kind of elbow, forearm, shoulder thing, they're going to go on the injured list no matter what, especially a guy like John who has the history with the elbow and the shoulder. So we don't know the severity yet. It could be nothing. It could be major, but either way, you really feel for the guy who made it all the way back, looks so strong in his first start of the year. I believe he pitched 7 shutout innings in Cincinnati, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah.
So you just feel for a guy who just can't stop getting injured, it seems.
Yeah. And the frustrating thing is every time that he has been healthy, he has looked great. The 3.60 ERA in that All-Star season, 2021, 3.62. Even in 2020, when he was coming back from, missing the opening day start, he looked really good. Those 4 starts at the end of last year, you're thinking the Orioles are going to get a major weapon back as they head into the playoffs because he was pitching late into games. One of his starts last year was 7 1/3 innings.
I
So
thought he
it's
was
not like
gonna,
he was showing any signs.
I thought he was going to pitch a no hitter that day in Cleveland.
Yeah.
I was
And
fully prepared for that. Yeah.
obviously, he has the no hitter on his resume already. This is a guy who has shown to be a big game pitcher and a guy who has shown to give the Orioles a lot of depth, too. It's not like he's Blake Snell out there and he's only going 5, 6 innings every start, even though the innings are quality. He's been one of Brandon Hyde's best weapons when he's been healthy. And it's just so frustrating for the Orioles because they're losing a guy that was going to give this rotation a lot of rest. We were looking at a 6-man rotation. Cole Irvin, obviously, pitching out of the bullpen yesterday. He had been kind of moved to that bullpen role because the Orioles are facing a June in which they only have 1 day off. So you're hoping, all right, 6-man rotation. They have Corbin Burns' starts mapped out. That won't be a problem. But having 6 guys who can start games, that will at least give you some length. And it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, and it's just, again, we don't know the severity. He could be out for 15 days. He could be out for the season. We don't know that yet. But Cole Irvin, it's no slump. He started the year off great. He looked great at the end of last year. So he should be fine filling into the rotation. But that 6-man rotation, it basically saved their season last year. They had a lot of pitchers facing fatigue who had never pitched that long. When they got Jack Flaherty, they put Cole Irvin back in the rotation at 6-man rotation for August and September. Even though Jack Flaherty didn't pan out as they intended, he still ate up some innings for them and still helped them out in that way. And they were really hoping to do that through June. I mean, 1 off day all of next month is just treacherous. 2 in 45 days. So they have a bullpen replacement now up there. Jonathan Heasley is in Chicago, but the 6-man rotation would have really helped them out if they were able to do it.
Yeah, I think that this is an injury that obviously you think of the player first and foremost with every injury, but I do think that this injury definitely will affect John Means more than it will affect the Orioles because the Orioles, yes, this will hurt their rotation depth, but they do have kind of a ready-made replacement, like you said, in Cole Irvin as another lefty who has been great this season. Saw a comment on YouTube about whether the Orioles could retain John Means, and that brings up a great point. This is coming at a brutal time for John Means because he is an impending free agent and somebody who is looking to shake the injury-ridden label from his career and maybe have one final good season before he hits free agency. This is a really, really tough development for him because he's going to be in his age 32 season next year. We saw this offseason how reticent teams were to pay pitchers who are 30 years or older. And John Means is got to be really hoping that he's going to come back, not just to help the Orioles, but to help reset his value here.
Right. And, in the likely case, the Orioles probably wouldn't re-sign him. They don't have a track record of doing that. New ownership, you never know. But they do have a couple guys on the way who could take his spot in rotation next year. But, you think about that aspect too. If he is his healthy self and if he's, that longevity he showed earlier in his career, he could make some money this offseason. But not if he's a guy who's on and off the injured list every 2 weeks. That's not going to garner a big contract. He'd probably honestly get a minor league deal at that point, despite, the potential that he has. So, you think about that part of it too.
Yeah, it would probably be. We've seen teams go to shorter term
Mm.
contracts when it comes to guys who are that age, but also that injury riddled. Unfortunately, we've kind of seen these kind of pillow contracts, as it were, teams that sign these guys to maybe a higher average annual value, but only 1 or 2 years. And for the
Right.
Orioles, like you said, this is a conversation. His free agency, that's for another day. But yeah, the Orioles do have a lot of options in house long term if they're looking to replace John Means down
Right.
the road. But on a personal standpoint, I mean, this is just a really, really tough development for Means too, because he's a team first guy. He's been a great clubhouse presence. He throughout the time when he was rehabbing from his Tommy John, he was popping on Masson broadcasts with Kevin Brown. He was frequently in the clubhouse, following the team around. He always publicly maintained optimism, and he really wanted to help this team in October, and he was bummed that he couldn't do that. And so for him personally, you just feel for the guy.
Yeah, he was a guy who was the lone bright spot during some of the worst seasons in Orioles history, and he survived that. He's one of four guys who survived the entire rebuild, and then to not get a play when they get to the other side in the playoffs last year, and now have to sit out again when they're doing great. It's just a bummer for him for how much he's been through and all the dark days that he lived through as a starter.
Yeah. Well, there were some more dark days as well in St. Louis because the Orioles, their streak has been snapped, Danielle, at 106 consecutive regular season sweepless series.
Nice aspect there.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm just ready to be done talking about it. I think this streak, whether you consider it legitimate or not, you have to acknowledge that it lost a significant amount of shine when the Orioles were swept in the most important series of the season last October.
I mean, most definitely. I mean, the streak is going to end at some point.
Yeah.
Bad team. I mean, World Series teams get swept during the regular season. It's not a big deal if they got swept as long as it doesn't continue from here on out. It's all streaks come to an end at some point.
Yeah.
I sort of thought the streak ended last year in the playoffs. The rest of this was just kind of, be a nice trivia question in like 20 years that we can all remember because we were there for it. But I think that they all agree the streak ended last year too.
Is it the second most famous streak in Orioles history? It lasted only 2 years and not the 14 that Cal Ripken Jr. had for his 21-31 streak. But is it the second most famous, Danielle, in your opinion?
I guess so, but it's like one, and then everything else is way down.
Yeah, 50 feet of crap. Yeah, exactly. The greatest streak of all time, and then 50 feet of crap, and then 106 consecutive.
Honestly,
series.
in 3 days, if you ask me what the streak number was, I probably wouldn't have remembered. So
Yeah, it lost a lot of luster when they got swept, obviously, and now we can just stop talking about it because now there won't be an asterisk when you bring it up, and it is also funny that it took what was a cataclysmic series weather-wise, where they get delayed once, pushed to the next day, and then the second game is delayed. A lot of weirdness in terms of how pitchers have to be used. It took all of that strangeness and a 3-game series for the Orioles to finally break their streak, which I think just goes to show what we already knew, that this Orioles team is just incredibly hard to beat 3 or 4 games in a row.
And it ended by, honestly, you can make the argument they beat themselves in that third game. I mean, their defense was atrocious in the 8th inning. Cedric Mullins misread that play or had bad base running. We didn't get to talk to him to get a clear answer on what had happened there in the 9th. But that was really just uncharacteristic mistakes from the Orioles there, and they cost that game. They had every chance to come back there.
Yeah, a comment on YouTube as well about Gunnar Henderson, some uncharacteristic mistakes in the field as well. I think that's one of those where, look, I think Gunnar Henderson could be a Gold Glove finalist by the end of the season because of his defensive range at shortstop. I think that's one of those series where you just chalk it up to weirdness with weather, weirdness with timing.
Yeah.
It happens over the course of a 162 game season.
And they also, there is something mental to watching one of your team leaders get hurt again.
Sure.
That happened to them too. I mean, that happened in the Mike Baumann game. He wasn't hurt, but the bullpen completely blew that game the day he got DFA'd because they were all so attached to him. So these things do impact the team as well.
Thank you for that perfect transition to talk about the Mike Baumann trade. The
You're
Orioles
welcome.
trading a guy who they placed on waivers just a few days ago. We already saw that Ryan McKenna, that one of the guys who's been with this team for a long time, got placed on waivers, picked up off waivers by the Giants. He's already starting in San Francisco. But Mike Baumann, who is a veteran reliever for this team, put in a lot of good innings. I know that fans at times, I've said on this show, have been maybe overly critical of Mike Baumann. It is important to remember that he had a 3.44 ERA in 18 and a third innings, but based on social media alone, you'd think that he had a 7 ERA. And last year, he had a 3.76 ERA. He was solid for this team out of the bullpen the last couple of years, had the ability to start games if you absolutely needed him to. But he's placed on waivers and traded to the Seattle Mariners, in addition to catcher Michael Perez going to Seattle for catcher Blake Hunt. I think this was also tough timing for the Orioles because had John Means been placed on the injured list a few days ago, maybe a week ago, that Mike Baumann might still be on this team because he was out of options and they really had to just, I think it was the Grayson Rodriguez getting activated off the IL. That was the move that precipitated Mike Baumann heading to waivers.
It was. And, good for Mike Baumann. He's going to go to Seattle. He's going to get in the bullpen there. He'll probably be able to stay up there for most of the season, ideally. So you're seeing the same thing with Ryan McKenna, where the Orioles are they're so good, they don't have room for everybody. And especially in the bullpen right now, the only guys who have options are Keegan Aiken and Yennier Cano, and you're probably not going to option either at this point. There may come a time where they have to option Keegan if he gets overworked just to get a fresh arm in there, especially during this long streak of games without a day off. But it's just there's going to be more tough decisions to come. There could be a couple other guys on the chopping block, especially in that bullpen, if they need to start rotating in fresh arms during the stretch.
Yeah. In terms of what the Orioles got in this deal from Seattle, getting Blake Hunt, I think, is a pretty solid return for somebody that you placed on waivers. Blake Hunt is a guy who's just 25 years old. He was in Seattle's top 30 prospect list, according to MLB Pipeline. He was their number 23 prospect. Of course, gets traded to the deepest farm system in all of baseball and doesn't crack the top 30, but I think that's to be expected. Hitting 293 with 4 homers and a 905 OPS in 24 AAA games. Supposed to be solid defensively behind the plate. Right now, this team doesn't need any catchers because Adley Rutschman and James McCann have 1-2 backstop spots locked up at the time being. But one of those guys could go down, knock on wood, with an injury at some point. You hope that they don't. So that's some nice depth. The Orioles obviously have Maverick Hanley down in AAA, who's having a nice season, 800 plus OPS right now. He's probably their third catcher if they absolutely needed one. But long term, Danielle, I kind of like this addition because James McCann is an impending free agent. And if he were to leave in free agency and the 19-year-old phenom Samuel Basallo, who is right now with AA, isn't considered ready by the Orioles front office to be the backup for Adley Rutschman, could be looking at Blake Hunt maybe making the opening day roster in 2025 to back up Adley.
Agree. I mean, Samuel Basallo, he has been injured to start the season, so he didn't make his first game as a catcher until mid-May. So that's a month and a half of catching development right there. There's no question that the 20-year-old has the bat. He can hit. He could probably hit in a major league game soon. But if they want to be able to trust his catching skills, he needs a bit more development. Catchers always take longer to come up through the system just because of the nature of their position. And he's a 20-year-old who didn't have a lot of formal catching training in the Dominican Republic. So he's even farther behind than maybe a kid who came up through the American system. So there's no question that he is going to be up there eventually, but it may be as a first baseman, it may be as a DH. They're not keen yet on their catching skills. So having somebody like Blake Hunt who can do it all for them so far, he hasn't made the majors yet, but he's done it all in AAA. that they can probably trust a little bit more at this point can be super helpful. But I also would not be surprised, given how this team feels about James McCann and his catching ability, if they didn't give him a 1-year contract for next year.
Yeah. And the way that McCann seems to feel about the Orioles, too. It's pretty
Yeah.
clear that he likes playing in Baltimore, likes it a whole lot better than he did New York, I think.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
they're
that
playing
this,
a whole lot better down here, so it's not
yeah,
hard to.
exactly. I think the player and the team both like each other a lot. The only thing is he is not getting any younger. I think he's 33 this
Yes.
season. So, whether the Orioles want to continue to give him another shot, this at least adding Blake Hunt adds some depth. And you never know. I mean, Samuel Basallo, I know he is very highly regarded. It would probably take a lot to pry him away from the Orioles. But if the Orioles want to make a splash at the trade deadline, Samuel
Mhm.
Basallo could be dealt away by this team, and there goes your backup catcher of the future. I mean, the Orioles might just consider him more valuable as a trade piece than as just a backup for Adley or, like you said, a first baseman DH type, which they are absolutely loaded with right now.
Especially because, who knows what's going to happen with John Means or any other starting pitchers as they go along with the rest of the season. If somebody else gets injured and they have
Yeah.
two guys on IL at the same time, they're going to have to trade for a pitcher, and they're going to need another top prospect like Samuel Basallo to go out and get that top pitcher. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty good point. He could be very valuable out there.
Yeah. I also saw some scuttlebutt on Twitter about whether the Orioles would feel the need to trade for a pitcher because of this John Means injury. I think you have to wait and see what the extent of this Means injury is, by the way, because like we said, he's just headed to the IL for now. He's undergoing further testing. We're waiting to see exactly what the extent of the injury is. But in the meantime, you wait to see. And then also, they are okay right now in terms of rotation options. The wild card is Tyler Wells, who does not appear to be headed back to this big league team anytime soon.
No,
Whether he
the
could
last
come back, yeah,
the last update we got is that he's in Sarasota not throwing at all.
yeah.
So he's nowhere close, if even in this first half of the season at this point.
Right. So maybe that increases the need for adding another pitcher. I think Wells probably would have come back and been in the bullpen anyway, which would have been a nice, bullpen option. But between the big three that the Orioles have right now, and Corbin Burnes, Grayson Rodriguez, and Kyle Bradish, you still feel good about that top three. And I'm still okay with, I know Dean Kramer has taken his lumps in a few outings this year, but I would still be comfortable with having Kramer and Cole Irvin as your 4-5. I wouldn't feel the need to go out and get a starting pitcher unless something changes dramatically in the next 2 months.
Maybe not immediately. I think at the trade deadline, if that's still your 5, if Means is still out, if Wells is not close or trending towards the bullpen, I don't think it could hurt them to go out and get a rental for the rest of the year to help them in the playoff push and then move Cole or Dean into the bullpen. So
sure.
I think a lot is up in the air. I don't think right now on May 23rd, they need to go out and get another starter.
Exactly. Yeah. It maybe if they are looking to add somebody for the second half of the season. I think from May until late July, they're probably okay unless somebody else, knock on wood, goes down.
I mean, things are going to be so much more expensive at this point in the year too. So you might as well wait.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right, Danielle. Well, you definitely have to catch up on your rest after a crazy weekend. We have Andy Koska in Chicago to cover this 4-game series between the Orioles and the White Sox. Then the Orioles come back home to face the Red Sox Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Orioles have their 4 starters lined up right now for Chicago: Grayson Rodriguez, Corbin Burnes, Dean Kramer, and Kyle Bradish. And then we'll figure out if Cole Irvin finds his way back into this rotation when they come back home. But in the meantime, follow Danielle at D_Allentuck. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Please do subscribe to the Baltimore Banner. $1 for 6 months to read all of Danielle's coverage, Andy's coverage, Kyle Goon's great columns, and much, much more. And please like, rate, review, subscribe. Tell your friends about the Banner Baseball Show. For Danielle Allentuck, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in.